a few ideas of, focused topics to have with farmers as you're talking about origination. But that stuff, it can be read through and determined on your own as well. So I'm going to jump into what we were going to talk a little bit about this afternoon, which is really focused on origination. We've kind of gone through some of the merchandising theory, basis, a lot of good conversation, I think, on why we do what we do, how some of the commercial decisions made are going to tie into origination. So we'll probably review a few of those points that we hit earlier, but still go through them. And again, like this morning, please, or like earlier, please add in comments and ask questions. So country elevators are like big funnels, right? Holding and metering out grain that is harvested once a year as the market demands. And I think there's a lot of different theories on origination, and we'll try to kind of wrap it in together on the close here. But grain origination has become more important in the industry. And why is that? Farmers are getting bigger. Efficiencies have given them opportunities to move grain to various markets. They're looking for trusted individuals to help them identify opportunity in the market. And so what is a successful marketing plan? And I think if you look on an agriculture job website, there's some pretty high-paid originators out there. There's been a demand. But I also think that the industry in the last 3 years has changed quite a bit. Today's picture versus what it was 3 years ago. And if you think about the market structure, when we had short crop years, a lot of demand for grain, short supply, there was a lot of people that were just pushed out on the street by grain elevators, major grain companies, ADM, CHS, that really all they were out there to do was buy grain. It wasn't necessarily that they had the relationships or the insight or the background to be doing it. They were, most of them knew what corn or futures and basis was, but ultimately it was almost just like knocking on doors. And in an inverted market, or when you've got that basis appreciation opportunity, I'm not saying marketing is easy, but generally I think that you don't have to be as savvy in where you're buying grain, because there's always, when it's in that high demand, there's always a bid and ask. You're always buying it here, and you can usually turn around and sell it here. But when you talk about carry markets and surplus grain and structures, and farmer wants to move grain, but we can't take it today. How can we nicely incentivize him or tell him, no, we don't want your grain, without telling him, no, we don't want your grain? So I think the role of originator has become a little more important. And as the industry's changed, consolidation, you can have a lot of conversations with elevators that don't use origination, and I take the grain I get, I'm happy with that. That's really not a growth model. A lot of the times those are the ones that are getting bought up by CHS or getting bought up in a merger. So there's an art to it, and I think it's becoming a little bit more significant, and maybe ties into probably some of the training that needs to happen with this new generation of originators. What makes the farmer want to move grain? Price, obviously. Not a lot we can do about that. Cash flow. We've seen this these past couple of years. It's been difficult to buy grain because farmer was cash flush. Market factors. Basis, transportation ability, pricing incentives, storage incentives, instinct. What I think the job of the originator to do is not to have all the answers for the farmer, but to give him as many opportunities and as much knowledge to ultimately make the decision that he comes out on his own. Like we said, maybe you're telling him about an inverse and a spread. The market's telling you to move cash grain. He doesn't want to do it. That's ultimately his decision. But if we were the ones who explained to him that it's probably a good thing to do that, for whatever reason he didn't want to do it, hopefully he remembers that and wants to build that relationship. But that's all part of a successful grain marketing plan, sitting down with these farmers, understanding crop insurance, knowing production cost, having those conversations with those farmers. Failure to develop a sound marketing plan, doing nothing, and failure to execute a marketing plan are probably three of the bigger decisions. And I remember when I was originating and I talked to farmers, even if it was, I sell a quarter of my crop here, 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 based on whatever their incentive, but they do it every year. It's still a marketing plan. At least he's got something. At least if he can give you an answer and say, no, if he can avoid, I think it's going higher, I consider that a marketing plan. First rule, price is unpredictable. A marketing plan built on price management won't be successful, or will be successful year in, year out, not predicting price. Most producers of grain and livestock do not enjoy marketing. Marketing performance suffers. And this was a pretty good quote. It was, farmers are terrible marketers. Farmer Jimmy Wayne. We fall in love with our crop. I think we used that a lot the last 2 years, where from the commercial side, when the market's telling you to move grain, it's don't fall in love with it. What are we waiting for? And you run into that a lot with farmers, and I think a lot of times they kind of not necessarily forget about their grain, but they got a lot going on. Price and inputs. Some of them are in Florida. Whatever it may be, the origination role of talking to them, making those phone calls, sometimes reminding them, hey, the market's up 20 cents and you've still got 100,000 bushels on DP. Sometimes that's as simple as a simple marketing plan that just works. And the reason price prediction isn't a solid base, and as originators, I always try to avoid the answer to what do you think the markets are going to do, or talk both sides of it. But you want to try to avoid that. Well, okay, the South America situation is pointing at this, but U.S. carryouts offsetting that. So in relative terms, what has the market done? A lot of times that's a good approach. Well, we've rallied 60 cents, and a small trucker strike in South America, that might be a good opportunity to sell. But having some sound backing to that, and trying to avoid the price prediction because of this reason, because of the marketing cycle, the emotions that go into that are going to make it so hard to make good marketing decisions. The blue line is the corn price. So, you guys can read them. I don't have to go through them all, but it's that we've had some with farmers on it pulling hair out, fear. And this is the cancel if close theory, right? Okay, well, it's gone to this, it's going higher. Confidence, excitement. Then it drops off. Well, why did it drop today? What's it doing? So, and the point is you can't predict that. I mean, maybe that's the cycle. Same corn chart. Maybe that's the cycle. It all depends on if you can avoid that emotion and turn it back to marketing plan of how much grain have you sold? What are you currently looking at DP? We'll talk a little bit about those structures, some of those things to offset the idea of DP cost, but try to bring it back to a risk management or price protection. As simple as, you don't have any grain sold and we've rallied 70 cents since the fall price where you put it on DP. Your DP charge was 30 cents. So you're net ahead 40 cents today and you haven't sold anything. Maybe that's a good place to start. Just those conversations where you can turn it away from, well, I don't know if it's going higher, I don't know if it's going lower, but here's what we do know. Here's what we've come to today. And just another point on the volatility of the market and trying to hammer in price prediction is what we want to avoid, and it's unpredictable, is there's your average yearly change or your high-low range in corn since 2001. 14-year average was $1.96. From 2010 to 2014, we've seen a $2.74 be the average change in a crop year. That's real money. I mean, that's a lot of money. $2.74 before my time in the industry, I've heard was a good corn price. Common marketing mistakes. Trends will continue forever. Well, volatility will continue forever. Last year I should have. Probably, in my experience, one of the most common ones was, oh, forward contracting wasn't the right decision last year. Wasn't the right decision before that. Last year we saw a summer rally. That's one point to make with 20 offsetting arguments against that kind of thing. But when you don't have a marketing plan or don't have a reason or fall in love with your crop, you can pretty easily convince yourself, I think, that one of these reasons is a good one. Big one, what I see locally tells me all I need. Got to get past that backyard vision, right? Because you have a good crop or a poor crop in one area with transportation and movement these days and the size of the global crop, it may not be as much of a bullish or bearish scenario locally. A good point to that is every year I think you hear central Corn Belt farmers talk about how cold it is in the Dakotas or issues with water up there almost every year. I don't know, those guys want to become corn farmers with everything they got, and they're actually getting pretty darn good at it. But they grow different hybrids, they have different farming practices, and they're coming up with a crop every year. But ultimately, no matter what, if you look at the production up there, well, we didn't get 100,000 corn acres planted in North Dakota. That's less than a bushel change in the Illinois or Iowa crop or whatever it may be. Because they're not as big of a producer, it's not as big of a change. The other part of that is when we had a tight crop here and we didn't have the ability to export. We took our exports, felt like almost down to zero 2 years ago. And we saw the ability as the global demand, as high prices cure high prices, more corn was grown in the rest of the world, and we saw a lot of the U.S. export needs get met by Ukraine, Black Sea. So, the market structure isn't on both sides, on the origination side and on the merchandising side is a lot bigger than just what we can see out of our back window. The other one is I sell when I need cash. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's not a sound marketing plan. So, those are the barriers. Those are the issues that, from the farmer or as an originator having conversations with the farmer, you're going to run into and you want to try to avoid. So now what we're going to do is kind of focus a little bit individually on each one of these things. Now, I'm not sure the percentages, they're probably not right, but I asked Tim the other day on kind of what tools you guys use for origination. And, overall it's IP grains. You guys are a big player in identity preserved non-GMO grains. DP probably significantly bigger this last year than in the past, but that's an origination tool. Traditional contracts, commodity pools, OTC products, condos, patronage, online offers. So as we look at that realm, that spectrum of tools, it's ultimately we're trying to get to a point of what do we have to offer besides price. It's great to be the bid in town, and there may be times where we are, and I don't want to come from the perspective of we're always trying to get more out of the farmer, because that's not at all what I'm getting at. The point is you can't always be price competitive. So what do we do to offset that? Or what do we do to avoid always pushing 2 cents? And ultimately, our entire farmer customer base thinks that, why are we even posting bid if we're always pushing 2 cents or nickel? How do you offset that stuff? Facility conditions, dump time is probably one of the bigger factors that go into those tools that is a little bit outside of the origination control, but good to have conversations with farmers when you're trying to get new grain, bushels coming from further away, if you highlight some of the advantages. And who's competition and what do they offer? So traditional cash or traditional types of contracts, that piece of the pie. I'm sure most of you guys have seen some of this stuff, but if not, these next 3 or 4 are you're going to see almost everybody offer them. And let's just go through them, talk about some of the advantages of them. So forward cash contract, is exactly what it says, cash, locking in the two components, futures and basis. It's a specific price for a specific delivery period. Farmer calls and sells you, he asks you what the price is, you go to your bid, you look at the bid on the futures, you look at your basis, here's our current price for today. Well, what is it for January of new crop? What is it for December new crop, July? It's your cash price, your flat price, futures and basis for that specific delivery period. The example, if basis is 10 under and set futures are at $5, you can cash contract or write a contract to a farmer for $4.90. So what risk does the elevator take on? What risk does a farmer have? Elevator risk is pretty limited in that scenario. Right? We've got a margin of position, but we've got cash coming in eventually. That may be our risk in that, is that will the farmer deliver that cash? If the market goes $2 higher, we've got a margin of position. And he all of a sudden may try to default on his cash contract. I've seen weirder things happen, but overall exposure to markets, unlike a DP or another type of contract, is limited from the elevator side. Farmer risk, well, higher prices. He's locking in flat price for that period and no upside potential. But he's protecting his downside by doing that. Basis only contract, exactly what it says. Locking in one component, just the basis, leaving the futures open. So, what it accomplishes, and when the farmer may want to do this, is that DP scenario we talked about. He may not like the futures price necessarily. It may still be inverted, but if anything, basis is strong at that day. So what the farmer's doing is he's just locking in the basis component of it and waiting for a higher futures price, waiting for a rally in the board to price that contract, fully price that contract. Farmer can deliver on that basis contract, and you guys do cash advances?
We'll do
okay.
it.
Okay, so he can get some cash against that without having to lock in that futures. But ultimately, he's got to price that. And that goes back to the roll scenario. And this is kind of just a good tool to think through, and probably more of a spread application for the origination side of the team is each futures expiration, if basis contracts are not priced, contract must be rolled. It sounds like you guys have a set date that you try to do that, which is good. That's, like I said, a lot of times in my experiences with customers, these kind of get forgot about. So rolling basis is rolling the farmer's contract to the next futures or deferred at the same cash value as he or she is taking nearby. So what does that mean? The concept of it is, and what to explain to a farmer is, there's probably a fee associated with it, but by rolling it, if it's in a carry market, if December is at $4 and his basis is 10 under the December, his cash price today, he's only locked in that basis, but his cash price would be $3.90. If March is at $4.10, what would his basis, so it's a 10-cent carry. To get that same cash price, his basis would now be 20 under the March. So he's not at a disadvantage. We're not, when he sees that his basis went from a 10 under to a 20 under, a lot of times farmers say, wait, I don't get it. Why did you do that? Well, we're pricing you off a higher futures. It's a carry market. The futures value down the road is worth more money. So, all he's doing there, if he rolls, is just saying, all right, I didn't see $4 geese corn, now I'm going to try for $4 March corn, and kicking the ball down the road. But and the opposite in an inverted market, right? If futures today are higher than the deferred, you're going to add to his basis to equate the same cash value. If you think about it as cash for cash, that's all you're doing on these rolls. Usually plus a fee.